Hello, I'm Wyandotte County District Attorney Mark Dupree. Thanks for joining us for the DA's Perspective. Today, we're going to be discussing opioids, specifically fentanyl. We will look at the ways our local law enforcement is handling the problem and the challenges that it presents, and also talk about the sentencing guidelines in place for those caught with fentanyl for distribution. And joining me today, we have the pleasure of sitting with Captain John Diaz, a 15-year veteran on the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, who happens to be an expert on this serious matter affecting all corners of Wyandotte County. Captain, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with a simple question. What are opioids?
It's a class of drugs that is typically used for pain management in a pharmaceutical setting for hospitals or doctors. It has great uses when administered by a physician or pharmacist or nurse.
Now tell me, what is fentanyl?
Pharmacy-grade fentanyl is a opioid also, but it is used for major pain care, end-of-life care, cancer patients, and major surgeries. It's used in very small doses, and it's administered by people that are educated and know how much to give.
Fentanyl is a very serious drug, bottom line, right? Something that ultimately can take someone's life. Right before we came in here, I was reading that a movie star that I like, Robert De Niro, his grandson, just suffered an overdose because of fentanyl, because he went and purchased pills that he didn't know was laced with fentanyl. Is this a serious issue, and how has it affected Wyandotte County?
The fentanyl that we're talking about is illicit fentanyl, which is illegally made and has absolutely no pharmaceutical use for human beings. We see it in Wyandotte County so much these days. I brought some stats to share with you. In 2022, we had 174 overdoses inside of Wyandotte County, or the city limits of KCK. Doesn't include Bonner or Edwardsville. And of those 174, 40 people lost their lives to fentanyl. But this year in 2023, we're already up to 103 overdoses, and we're just now halfway past the year, right? And of those, 28 people have died.
28 people have died, and it's the month of July.
It is so highly potent. And what some people don't understand is the small amount to be a fatal dose, which is 2.55 milligrams.
What are we doing to try to make sure we rid our streets of this potent drug?
Last year, we seized 124,000 fentanyl-laced pills. So far this year, we're at 158,000. And so the last year number, we've already exceeded that. But the thing that really bothers me the most is we've recovered 26 pounds of pure fentanyl. That's not fentanyl that's pressed into pills. So I didn't do the math of 26 pure pounds of fentanyl to milligrams, but that is an insane amount of possible deaths from that.
You know, growing up here in Wyandotte County and having seen quite a bit of drugs in my lifetime, and seeing how it affects people's lives, and not just their life, right? Yes, they could ultimately end up dead, but it also affects their family, and it affects those loved ones that are around them. What type of family impact do you see when individuals that you deal with who either one lose their lives because of this drug and dealing with their family and trying to explain to them what happened, or in other ways by which you have to deal with these families?
We already talked about the 40 deaths from last year, now up to 28. Our detectives respond out to those, and they have to deal with the family and try to console them, but they also have that job to do to find out who gave them that pill, who caused that death to this family, so we can seek justice for them. And that's what my guys really do a great job on, is going after the dealers to make sure they know they can't put this poison on our streets. Parents have lost their adult kids to fentanyl, and it's ranged from teenagers all the way up to 60-year-old men and women that have died from taking these pills.
You know, I want to stay there for 1 second, because I think it's extremely important that your folks know at the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, and every law enforcement officer that are out there, especially the ones who are on the front lines, who are really, quite frankly, dealing with this stuff on a daily basis, having contact with the individuals who are selling this stuff. And quite frankly, you're not knowing what you're dealing with until you get into it. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the work that you guys are doing. But what are you all doing to make sure that you all protect yourself if you run into fentanyl? What do you do to make sure that if one of your officers run into this stuff, that they too can still walk away rather than having some type of overdose or reaction?
So we do multiple things. If an officer in the street, a patrolman finds fentanyl, we will page in our support officers to come collect that fentanyl, because they're trained to do it. We wear the gloves. We go back to the office. We have a hood that sucks out all the air to make sure we don't get exposed to ourselves. We have Narcan, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That is a life-saving drug. But one of the messages I want to make sure parents know is if they come across fentanyl in a kid's room. Talk about that real quick?
Yes, please.
So if by chance they see a blue pill with an M30 on it, that's what we typically see for these fentanyl-laced pills. If they see those, sometimes they don't want to call the police, but we have to get rid of those pills, because if it gets in the hands of a young one, they're going to really, really regret that. And we want to make sure we can help them. So call the police. We will take those drugs out of there. Don't touch it unless you absolutely have to. If you do touch a blue pill, just wash your hands, soap and water. If by chance there's a white powdery substance in a room you come across and you touch it, do not freak out. Don't make it airborne. That's when it becomes really deadly, because it gets in your nose, your eyes, your mouth, and it's ingested. And that's when it's a major problem. If it's sitting there on a table, don't touch it. Let us come recover that. But pretty please do not freak out and cause it to go in the air, because then you have multiple people exposed to it, and that could be a real problem.
I think that's extremely important for folks to hear and to know that if you see it, don't touch it.
Yeah.
I think it's also important for parents to understand that this is not about getting your child in trouble.
No.
This is about saving your child's life and saving your life. And this stuff will kill you. And so it's important that they reach out. In the prosecutor's office, we see these cases all the time. Mm-hmm. After your detectives do all the hard work, you bring it on over here with the evidence, and we then file charges. And we file charges mainly on those who are caught selling these drugs and putting it on the streets of our community. With those types of prosecutions, we can get up to 204 months on an individual, depending on their criminal history, and putting them away for a long time. What message do you want to really make sure that the community knows? We know as prosecutors what we're looking for and what we're prosecuting. What can you tell that mom, that dad who sees this blue pill in their room?
Well, as I said, make sure we get the help we need there for the medical side or the police side to recover that drug. But we're not there to arrest your children, as you've said. We're going after the dealer. I understand, and we understand, that it is an addiction. Opioids are highly addictive, and we get that. We're not trying to arrest the user, because that is not going to get the result we need. We need the people that are selling that drug and giving your kids or adults these drugs that are causing the problem. I cannot emphasize it enough. We are going after the dealers and not the users.
Do not be afraid to save your own child's life. This is about making sure that we get the folks who are selling this stuff off of our streets so that we can protect our families. Here's the other part that is something, as I have continued to talk with so many families, their child goes and they're purchasing what they believe is one type of pill. Mm-hmm. And unbeknownst to them, they take another, or that pill was laced. And now you have fentanyl powder, which oftentimes lace individuals who are smoking marijuana in joints, and it's laced with fentanyl. All of these things has the ability to kill you. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
Is there any saving mechanism that we can now try to make sure that everyone is educated about? Specifically, what comes to mind is Narcan.
We have a Narcan here that actually is carried by all of our police officers. It's the nasal spray. So if you've ever taken an allergy medication through your nostrils, this is the same sort of thing. And ultimately, you just stick that in your nasal canal and press that red plunger all the way. You don't half spray, it's a full spray. They get all the medicine. And this ultimately goes and removes the opioid, the fentanyl, off of your receptors in your brain that stop you from breathing. That's what fentanyl does, is it stops your breathing, which of course you can't breathe, you're going to die. So the Narcan removes that from your receptor and allows you to start breathing again. The scary thing about that, though, is if you have a high level of fentanyl in your system, this will only work for a limited amount of time. So what we've seen is people have administered Narcan, they come back to life, but then 15 or 20 minutes later, they're overdosing again without taking any more fentanyl. It's because they had such a high level in their system. So if you administer Narcan, you got to get them to a hospital. And so those overdose stats I gave you, those are what's known to us as law enforcement. That's not the ones that ultimately administer their own Narcan and solve their problems and get them to the hospital, because we're not notified of that. So our numbers are probably much higher than what we've actually reported.
What sticks out to me is they've made it so easy.
Mm-hmm.
You can just stick it in your nose and press. So I don't have to worry about getting a big old needle, stabbing myself, but I can just do this. Is this something that is accessible to citizens in our community? And if so, how and where?
So it's available without any prescriptions. You can get it at any pharmacy. Just probably call ahead to make sure they have it. Insurance helps cover some of the costs. Sometimes depends on their insurance provider. Or our health department offers it to our citizens also at little or no cost, because they understand how much good it does. And the one thing I didn't mention is if you believe anyone's having an overdose, you can give them Narcan, and if they're not on an opioid overdose, it will not hurt them. It can only help them. So you could give it to someone just sleeping and think they're overdosing. It will not hurt that person at all.
That is very good to know. You can't hurt a person with the Narcan. It can only help them. You know, I want to close, but I want to give you an opportunity. Is there something else that you want the folks who are watching this to know about fentanyl and about how we're trying to deal with this, and what other information you want to tell you?
Just a few things. Obviously, it takes a team to do this, just like you have your team around you. I have my team. It's 14 men and women that risk their lives to go out and battle this fentanyl crisis, and also our SWAT team. They're our enforcement arm that is out there helping us get the dealers off the street, which is a dangerous job in of itself, being a tactical officer, but also dealing with fentanyl on the same side, because now you have two dangerous situations rolled into one. So we need our team to make this happen. The other thing I want to bring up is we need our public support, and we need their help, because we only have 14 officers out there looking to solve this problem or help solve this problem. We need them to help us also. On the overdoses, give us what you know. If it's a loved one, don't hide that drug dealer. Tell us what you know so we can make sure we go after them. We need their support. And you can call the TIPS hotline or remain anonymous, which everyone knows the TIPS hotline number. We have our own narcotics hotline number, which is 913-573-6287. The sergeant listens to those tips and assigns those out. Or if you want to email us at narcotics@kckpd.org, that will go to myself and the sergeant only, and then we divvy out those tips depending upon what we have going on that time. But please call when someone is overdosing and give us the information so we can help your family.
You know, what I want you all to take away today is that drugs are bad, all drugs, but fentanyl is one of the worst drugs that the market in our community has seen, and it has affected so many lives across this country, but specifically right here in Wyandotte County. To law enforcement, we appreciate you, what you're doing.
Thank you.
As the DA, many ask, well, Dupree, what are you doing? Yes, we're prosecuting. Yes, we're sending people to jail. But we're doing this today to try to be preventative, to try to educate our community and make sure that they understand that this thing is serious. This is not simply about jail. This is about saving lives. And in order to do that, as Captain Diaz said, we have to utilize each other. We can't do it by ourselves. We need your help, just like you need ours. If you see something, say something. It's not about getting more prosecutions. It's about saving more lives. And sadly, We have our children who are overdosing because of ignorance, and because you have people out here who are lacing other drugs without individuals knowing it. And the only way we find out is if someone dies. Let's change that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this. Be blessed.